Get out! Get out of my house, Kieran!" Delaney's voice cracked the opulent silence of the penthouse, a sound more devastating than any shattering glass. Kieran Flynn, a man who controlled global markets, flinched. He clutched the envelope, proof of his infidelity, as his heavily pregnant wife pointed a trembling finger at the door. "You chose her. Now, live with your choice. This baby will never know the sound of your lying voice." His mistake was monumental, his betrayal total. He walked away from everything, blinded by the fleeting allure of Talia Monroe, never suspecting that the price of his freedom would be his soul, and that 5 years later, the woman he abandoned would hold the key to his entire world. The scent of success had always clung to Kieran Flynn like an expensive cologne. At 35, he was the architectural marvel of ambition, all sharp suits, sharper wit, and an empire built on fiber optics and ruthlessly executed mergers. Flynn Technologies was his kingdom, and the penthouse apartment overlooking Manhattan was his gilded throne room. Yet, the throne was beginning to feel cold. Delaney, his wife of 7 years, was the quiet anchor to his chaotic storm. She was an artist, her studio a sanctuary of muted colors and soft light, a deliberate contrast to the chrome and glass of Kieran's world. They had met in college, Delaney all hopeful idealism, Kieran all burning drive. She had loved the man he was. He had become addicted to the man he was becoming. The tension started as a whisper and grew into a low, perpetual hum. Kieran was always late, always on a call, always too tired for the connection they once shared. The hum intensified 2 months ago when Delaney had announced her pregnancy. It wasn't the joyous, unifying moment she had envisioned. For Kieran, it felt like a padlock snapping shut on the life he secretly felt he was outgrowing. "Damien, run the projections again. I need that acquisition closed before the Q3 meeting," Kieran barked into his headset, pacing the length of the marble countertop. Damien King, his chief legal counsel and oldest friend, sighed on the other end. "Kieran, slow down. You haven't slept in 72 hours. And more importantly, you promised Delaney you'd be home early tonight. It's her birthday." Kieran stopped, running a hand through his perfectly tailored hair. "A birthday is a Tuesday, Damien. A hostile takeover of Omnidata is a legacy. Just send me the revised term sheet. I'll sign it from here." He hung up, the small click feeling immense in the silent apartment. He was home early, yes, but only to grab a new suit before flying to Hong Kong. Delaney emerged from the master suite, her elegant linen dress unable to conceal the prominent swell of her pregnancy. She carried a small wrapped box. Her eyes, usually warm like amber, held a nervous flicker. "Kieran, you're here," she said, her voice soft. "Just for an hour, honey. Hong Kong meeting moved up. Look, happy birthday." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, a diamond tennis bracelet. "I asked Damien to pick it up. He said you liked this style." Delaney didn't reach for it. "I appreciate the thought, Kieran, but I bought my own gift today." She held out the small box. "I was hoping we could open this one together." Kieran glanced at his watch. 55 minutes. "Can't it wait, love? I have to pack the new specs for the merger. Silvio Laurent is already circling, and if I don't close this deal, he'll swallow Omnidata whole." Silvio Laurent was Kieran's personal nemesis, a man whose success seemed engineered solely to undermine Kieran's own. "It's important, Kieran. Please." Something in her tone, a quiet steel he hadn't heard before, made him pause. He took the box. It was light. He tore the paper and opened the simple cardboard. Inside, nestled on a cotton, was a small, white plastic device, a paternity test. The world seemed to lose its expensive soundproofing. "What is this, Delaney? Is this a joke?" he asked, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. She met his gaze, and all the years of quiet support dissolved into raw, agonizing truth. "I had a feeling, Kieran, a growing, nagging dread. Then I saw the charges on the corporate Amex, the ones you forgot to audit, the private jet to Ibiza in April, the suite at the Ritz in Paris. I wasn't with you. And the receipts weren't for Damien King or any male client." "Delaney, stop. This is insane. I'm an international businessman. I have clients all over the globe." He tried to keep his voice steady, the familiar corporate defense mechanism kicking in. "Her name is Talia Monroe, Kieran. She works in PR for your competitor, Laurent Group, and she's very good at her job." Delaney's face was pale, but her voice was unwavering. "I ran the test a month ago. I needed to know. The baby is yours, Kieran. Biologically, genetically, undeniably yours." The relief of that statement was instantly smothered by the crushing weight of the accusation. He had never intended for Delaney to find out. He was going to handle it, cleanly, professionally, after the Omnidata deal closed. "Talia is a business connection, Delaney. It's complicated." The word sounded pathetic, even to him. "Complicated?" Delaney gave a humorless laugh, sharp and brittle. She walked over to her easel, where a large canvas was draped. She yanked the cover off. It was a painting, but not of the soft landscapes she favored. It was a brutal portrait of Kieran, his face a mask of avarice, his eyes empty, holding a leash tied to a miniature golden cage. "I finished this today. It's the complicated man you are," she whispered. "I loved you. I was making a life for us, and you were busy buying a fling. I'm 8 months pregnant, Kieran. 8 months. And you were planning your new life with a younger, flashier model from your rival's firm." The sight of her, huge with their child, standing amidst the ruins of their shared history, was a punch to the gut. The guilt was a physical sickness. "I'm sorry, Delaney. I didn't want to hurt you. But I can't. I can't be what you need anymore. I feel stifled here. Talia understands the drive. She gets the ambition." He pulled the official-looking envelope he had intended to leave on his desk. It was an initial offer for a financial settlement and a dissolution of marriage agreement, drafted by Damien on a need-to-know basis. "I was going to give you this. The assets are split 60-40 in your favor, plus the Hampton house and substantial alimony. It's a clean break." Delaney's eyes didn't leave the document. She just pointed at the door. "Get out! Get out of my house, Kieran!" He stood there, frozen, trying to find a corporate loophole in the emotional wreckage. There was none. He saw the cold, hard finality in her eyes, the death of love. He had chosen money over morality, ambition over family, and now he was being evicted from his own life. "I'll send Damien King the final papers," he muttered, his voice hollow. He left the diamond bracelet on the counter, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of the golden cage, leaving behind the woman who loved him, and the life he was too blind to see was precious. He didn't look back. The scent of success suddenly smelled like ash. The transition from husband to absentee millionaire bachelor was seamless, largely facilitated by Talia Monroe. Talia was 28, brilliant and ruthless. She didn't offer comfort. She offered validation. Where Delaney had sought to ground Kieran, Talia encouraged him to fly higher, faster, and more recklessly. She was fire, and Kieran, feeling the cold weight of his guilt, was desperate to burn. "You did the right thing, darling." She was a liability, Talia purred, smoothing the lapel of his suit as they stood in her new, minimalist apartment in Tribeca, paid for by Kieran, of course. A pregnant wife and a crumbling art studio? That's not a CEO. That's a middle manager. Kieran took a deep drag of his expensive cigar, the smoke burning his throat. Delaney took the news badly. She refused to negotiate the settlement directly. Damien is handling everything. Of course she did. She lost her meal ticket, Talia said dismissively. She, unlike Delaney, was fascinated by the mechanics of his ambition. She analyzed balance sheets, discussed market cap, and had an uncanny understanding of corporate maneuvering. She was, in fact, an asset, professionally, working within Silvio Laurent's firm. This proximity to his rival's camp was the first major twist in Kieran's trajectory. Talia convinced Kieran that the only way to truly secure his legacy and crush Silvio was not through the Omnidata acquisition, but through a risky, high-leverage move, selling off Flynn Tech's highly profitable, yet geographically limited infrastructure subsidiary, Atlas Com, and using that capital to go all in on a volatile, untested blockchain venture. Atlas Com is pure cash flow, Kieran. Selling it now is a fire sale, Damien King warned, leaning back in his leather chair in Kieran's new, cavernous office. It's too short-sighted, especially with the baby coming. You need stability. Stability is for the weak, Damien. This is an evolution, Kieran argued, echoing Talia's recent talking points. Talia says we're too tied up in yesterday's tech. The blockchain venture, Nexus Global, is the future. I need liquid capital. The Atlas Com valuation is fair, and the buyer is anonymous, overseas, perfectly clean. What Kieran didn't know was that the anonymous buyer was a shell corporation, secretly managed by Silvio Laurent. Talia, using her access to both Kieran's strategy and Laurent's intelligence, was orchestrating the most brilliant corporate raid of her life. She was securing Atlas Com, the very division Laurent Group needed for its global expansion, while simultaneously destabilizing Kieran by pushing him into a hyper-risky venture. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Delaney refused the massive financial package. She insisted only on her original art studio property and a small, fixed sum. She wants to hurt you, Kieran. Take the fight to the media, Talia urged. No, Kieran said, the last vestiges of his conscience flaring. The media will crucify me for leaving a pregnant wife. Let her have the studio. I want this done. Delaney's resilience was unexpected. She wasn't fighting for money. She was fighting for dignity. She signed the final papers a week before she was due. The papers included a clause stating that Kieran forfeited all parental rights, save for a mandated annual trust payment, which Delaney would control until the child was 18. She wanted him gone, legally and emotionally. The final days were a blur. Kieran signed the Atlas Com sale documents. The funds flooded his accounts. He watched the news footage of the old Flynn Tech headquarters being demolished to make way for the new Nexus Global Tower, a symbolic obliteration of his past. Then, a text message from Damien. Terse and simple. It's a girl. Delaney is fine. Kieran stared at the screen. A daughter. He had a daughter. A tiny human he had deliberately signed away. There was no joy, only a crushing, icy vacuum where his heart should have been. He felt the briefest flicker of the man he used to be, the man who had imagined reading bedtime stories and teaching a child to ride a bike. But Talia's hands were on his shoulders, her lips on his ear. Congratulations, CEO Flynn. Now, about that Nexus Global launch party. He turned away from the message, from the guilt, from the new life he had created, and immediately rejected. He bought a new, faster car, a bigger diamond for Talia, and dove headfirst into the high-stakes gamble of Nexus Global, drowning the memory of his daughter's birth in a sea of ambition and denial. He never asked for the baby's name. 5 years passed. They were years measured in stock valuations, private jets, and the constant, breathless consumption of the new. Kieran Flynn was now Sir Kieran Flynn in the business journals, his name synonymous with the explosive rise of Nexus Global. He had crushed Silvio Laurent in the initial market phase, momentarily, achieving the revenge he craved. He lived with Talia in a sprawling modernist home in the Hollywood Hills, a monument to their mutual success and appetite. Talia had successfully left Laurent Group and now ran her own high-profile boutique PR firm, securing the biggest deals and attracting the most volatile clients. She was stunning, polished, and demanding. A woman who saw life as a zero-sum game, which suited Kieran perfectly until it didn't. The glamour, once intoxicating, had begun to feel like an obligation. The five-star trips were interchangeable. The cutting-edge art felt sterile. He found himself, late at night, staring out over the glittering grid of Los Angeles, feeling profoundly, irrevocably lonely. Their connection, built on shared ambition, had calcified into a transactional partnership. Talia's conversation was always about growth metrics, networking opportunities, and the strategic positioning of their respective brands. They rarely laughed. They never had a quiet evening. One afternoon, Kieran found Talia in their dressing room, meticulously laying out a collection of diamond necklaces. "Which one for the governor's gala tonight, Kieran? The 4-carat cushion or the new Riviere?" she asked, not looking up. "Talia, we don't have to go. My head is pounding, and the Nexus server farm update failed this morning. I'm exhausted." She finally looked up, her perfectly sculpted brow furrowed in disapproval. "We always go, Kieran. It's not a choice. It's optics. Damien King is waiting for us downstairs, and you know how important it is for us to be seen next to the governor. It validates the next round of funding." "Validation? Everything is validation with you," he muttered, running a hand over the smooth, cool fabric of a silk tie. "Everything is validation when you're building an empire, Kieran. Delaney didn't understand that. She wanted a cottage and a puppy. I want a seat at the table. You chose the table." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the thin veneer of their happiness. He remembered Delaney's quiet presence, her tendency to curl up with a book and a mug of tea, the way she used to paint, totally absorbed, untouched by the noise of the financial world. He remembered her face that night. Not angry, but devastatingly disappointed. The memory was like a piece of grit under his skin. He hadn't seen his daughter. Not once. He had never even asked for her name. He only received an annual email from Damien, confirming the trust deposit had been made, always signed off with a curt, "All is well." He had instructed Damien King never to mention Delaney Holt or the child otherwise, but the silence had become deafening. One evening, while Talia was away on a business trip in London, Kieran found himself wandering the halls of his vast, empty house. He stopped in the media room and, on a whim, opened his laptop. He typed 2 words into the search bar: Delaney Holt. The results were slow. She had no major social media presence. The first few hits were old articles about their engagement. Then, an unexpected link. The Holt Gallery. Emerging Contemporary Art. He clicked it. The website was clean, elegant, and focused. Delaney was listed not as an artist, but as the gallerist and founder. The gallery was small, based not in Manhattan, but in a rapidly gentrifying industrial corner of Brooklyn. Her bio image was a recent photo. She looked different. The soft, college sweetheart look was gone, replaced by an intensity, a quiet confidence, and a subtle steeliness that suited her. He scrolled through the featured artists, her taste impeccable. Then he saw a link to a non-profit initiative, the Phoenix Project. He clicked again. The project was Delaney's brainchild, an arts mentorship program for single mothers and underprivileged children, running free workshops and providing studio space, often in the very studio he had signed over 5 years ago. He read the mission statement, his chest tightening. To build a life not just on consumption, but on creation, to show that true value lies in resilience, not in revenue. It was a direct, elegant rebuke of everything he represented. She hadn't wasted the assets he'd left her. She hadn't sunk into despair. She had used her passion to build something authentic, something meaningful. And then, a gallery photo, a child's painting of a bright, lopsided sun. Underneath, a caption, "Our youngest artist, Maya, making her mark at the Phoenix Project." Maya. His daughter's name was Maya. The shock of that realization was visceral. 5 years. 5 years of deliberate ignorance, and the universe had just slapped him in the face with her name on a public website. He closed the laptop, suddenly unable to breathe. He felt a profound, burning shame. Not for the adultery, but for the casual, arrogant cruelty of his abandonment. He had convinced himself that Delaney was a victim he had generously compensated. Now, he saw her as a survivor who had built a kingdom on the ruins of his betrayal. And he saw himself, trapped in a false gold cage, looking for an escape that only led to more emptiness. The knot of regret that started as a small flicker on his daughter's birthday had now become a massive, agonizing stone in his gut. Kieran's uneasy equilibrium, the careful balance between professional success and personal hollowness, was about to shatter. The disruption came not from a sudden market crash, but from a strategic, slow-moving corporate siege orchestrated by the one person he thought he had defeated, Silvio Laurent. For 5 years, Silvio had quietly waited. He had absorbed Atlascom, Flynn's former cash cow, and used its stable infrastructure to secure his own position. Now, he was coming for Nexus Global. The trouble began with a seemingly innocuous patent dispute. Nexus Global's core tech, the blockchain engine, was suddenly challenged by a newly established shell company, Aegis Solutions. The lawsuit was filed in an obscure jurisdiction designed to maximize legal complexity and cost. "This is an attack, Kieran. A sophisticated, multi-front attack," Damian King said, his face strained during a 2 a.m. video call. "Aegis Solutions is demanding an injunction against our core infrastructure in the South American market. If we lose that, our stock tanks 40%. Who is behind Aegis? I want to know the source of the funding, Damian," Kieran demanded, his voice dangerously low. "It's a black hole, Kieran. Layered shell companies, but the legal team advising them. It's the same firm Silvio Laurent used for the Atlascom acquisition 5 years ago. This is Silvio, playing the long game." The legal fight was going badly. Nexus Global was built on speed, not stability, and the complex, international nature of the blockchain made it legally vulnerable. Kieran needed a definitive, unique asset to prove prior use and originality, something only the very first engineers would have had access to. "We need the original source code repository, Damian, the beta version from 2017. It was stored on the old Flynn tech servers before the demolition," Kieran explained, pacing his office. "I know, but we sold those servers as part of the Atlascom fire sale, remember? They went with the infrastructure division. The buyer was anonymous. Overseas." The blood drained from Kieran's face. Atlascom, the company he sold to fund his flight from Delaney, the company Talia had advised him to shed. "Find out who bought Atlascom, Damian. Now, I don't care what NDA you have to break or what price you have to pay. We need those servers." The next morning, Damian walked into Kieran's office, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. "I found the buyer. It took 3 days and every dirty trick I know. It wasn't Silvio Laurent directly. It was a holding company based in the Cayman Islands, but the beneficiary is, or rather was, the Laurent Group. Kieran swore violently. I knew it. Silvio played us. He waited 5 years for this leverage. Wait, Kieran. There's a twist, Damien interjected, holding up a file. The holding company didn't keep the data storage division. 2 years ago, they sold off a small part of the physical assets, specifically the old, decommissioned server farm where the 2017 backup tapes were stored. They sold it for pennies on the dollar to a small, local entity in Brooklyn. Kieran leaned forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. Who, Damien? Give me a name. Damien opened the file and pushed a single printout across the desk. It wasn't a corporate logo. It was a simple, elegant black letterhead. Holt Resilience Labs. Founder and CEO, Arabella Knox. Principal partner, Delaney Holt. Kieran stared at the name, his ex-wife's name, listed not as an artist, but as a principal partner in a new, unknown tech venture. Delaney, Kieran choked out. What the hell is Delaney Holt doing with a tech lab? It gets worse, Kieran. Holt Resilience Labs is not just a lab. They specialize in data archival, recovery, and security for non-profit organizations and small businesses. They took those old servers, refurbished them, and created an independent archival service. They have the physical backup tapes. They have the 2017 source code. The gravity of the situation hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had dismissed as a quiet artist, the woman whose life he had destroyed, was now in possession of the single, non-replicable asset that could save his billion-dollar empire from his fiercest enemy. Delaney Holt had gone from being the abandoned wife to being the ghost in the boardroom. Who is Arabella Knox? Kieran asked, trying to stabilize his voice. Arabella Knox is the tech genius. She's Delaney's partner, professionally and personally. They met through that Phoenix project Delaney started. Knox handles the code. Delaney handles the strategy and the community outreach. They are very successful, very protective of each other. And they hate you, Kieran. With good reason. The chilling truth of the twist settled over him. Delaney had not only rebuilt her life, she had armored herself with genuine purpose and strategic success. His ambition had led him to abandon her for a viper, Talia, who helped Silvio steal his security blanket, Atlascom. And now, the woman he had wronged, who was raising his daughter, held the only key to his survival, stored on the very servers he'd jettisoned to pursue the empty life Talia promised. I need to meet her, Damien. I need to talk to Delaney Holt. I need to get those files. Damien's expression was grim. Kieran, this isn't a negotiation with a competitor. This is a personal debt. Delaney doesn't need your money. She needs your regret. Kieran looked out the window, the glittering lights of the city now mocking his false victory. 5 years. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had created a brilliant, powerful adversary who had accidentally inherited the weapon he needed. He had to face her, not as a CEO, but as the man who had abandoned his pregnant wife and their daughter, Maya. The regret was no longer a personal pain. It was a corporate crisis. The most shocking chapter of his life was about to begin. Kieran Flynn had faced down hostile boards, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and endured public scrutiny. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer terror of walking into a small, repurposed warehouse in industrial Brooklyn. This was Delaney's domain. He found the address, a brick building marked only by a stylized, soaring bird logo. The Phoenix Project. He was dressed in a $4,000 suit, a relic of the life he was fighting to save. He felt absurdly out of place. Inside, the ground floor was a riot of color and noise. Children were painting murals, Single mothers were working at easels, and the air smelled of turpentine and possibility. He spotted Delaney instantly. She was wearing simple jeans and a paint-splattered shirt, her hair pulled back. She was laughing, not the polite, reserved laugh he remembered, but a genuine, unrestrained sound directed at a small, dark-haired girl, helping her mix paint. Maya. Kieran felt the air leave his lungs. 5 years of abstract guilt dissolved into a wave of agonizing realization. This vibrant, curious child was his daughter. He stepped back into the shadow of the doorway, watching the genuine connection between mother and child, a universe away from the sterile validation he found with Talia. Delaney saw him then. Her smile vanished, replaced by an expression of cold, professional dismissal, as if she were confronting a bill collector she had successfully dodged for years. Kieran. I assumed Damien King would handle this. That was his job, she said, walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Damien couldn't. This is personal. I need to talk to you, Delaney. About the servers. Kieran kept his voice low. The servers, she repeated, her eyes narrowed. The physical junk you discarded 5 years ago to chase a woman who was, and remains, a walking conflict of interest. The servers that contain the only evidence you need to prove your own intellectual property theft was a long con orchestrated by your current mistress and your corporate rival. Kieran winced. You know everything. I'm not the naive college girl anymore, Kieran. My partner, Arabella Knox, has a talent for connecting dots, especially when those dots lead to corporate espionage. Yes, we know what Silvio Laurent is doing. And yes, we have the original 2017 Nexus Global backup tapes. They're sitting in the vault of Holt Resilience Labs, right upstairs. I'll pay you, Delaney. Name your price. Nexus Global is worth billions. I can make you and the Phoenix Project financially independent for life. He reverted to his only language, money. She laughed, the sound harsh and cutting. You still don't get it. Your money is tainted, Kieran. It's what you chose over us. We don't need your capital. We have integrity, which is proving to be a much rarer and more valuable commodity. She glanced over to a side room, where a woman with sharp, focused eyes and a shock of electric blue hair was working intensely on a rack of servers. Arabella Knox. Arabella nodded, a silent, powerful warning. Here are my terms, Kieran, Delaney said, leaning in. This is not a financial transaction. This is a payment in kind. For 5 years, you paid us off to forget us. Now you pay us in presents to remember us. She detailed her demands, each one a calculated blow to his ego. Full corporate transparency. Kieran must provide Delaney and Arabella with full, verifiable details of the Aegis Solutions lawsuit and the extent of Talia Monroe's professional relationship with Silvio Laurent, including any proof of current or past conspiracy. The Nexus audit. For the next 3 months, Kieran must spend 3 full afternoons a week at the Phoenix Project, performing a comprehensive pro bono audit of their non-profit infrastructure, grants, and operational security. He would be working directly under Arabella Knox, the volunteer clause. He must also spend 1 full Saturday per month volunteering at the children's workshop, doing whatever Delaney assigns him. No complaints, no excuses. The no-contact rule. He is explicitly forbidden from revealing his identity as Maya's father. He is simply Kieran, the tech consultant. If he violates this, the original source code is permanently destroyed. If you refuse, Nexus Global falls. Silvio Laurent wins, and you lose everything. And you will know, Kieran, that your ruin was architected by the 2 women you chose to hurt the most. If you accept, you get the servers when the 3 months are up, and only if Arabella and I are satisfied that the payment was genuine. Kieran was silent, the weight of the terms immense. They weren't just demanding the source code. They were demanding his time, his humility, and a confrontation with the true cost of his abandonment. "I accept," he finally said, the word raw. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring a lunchbox. We don't cater to billionaires." Delaney gave him a brief, chillingly satisfied smile. "Welcome to the real world, Kieran." The first weeks of Kieran's penance were excruciating. His bespoke suits were replaced by ill-fitting Phoenix Project t-shirts. The scent of success gave way to the smell of dust, paint, and industrial cleaners. In the small, crowded back office of Holt Resilience Labs, Arabella Knox was his overseer. Arabella was sharp, precise, and harbored a palpable, justifiable disdain for him. "The firewall needs restructuring, Kieran," she'd drone, not looking up from her console. "This funding application database uses 1990s encryption. How did you overlook something so fundamental at Nexus Global?" Kieran, used to delegating all mundane tasks, found himself painstakingly debugging SQL queries and manually inputting grant data. He was humiliated, but the work was honest and, surprisingly, demanding. The true test, however, was Saturday. Kieran, the man who once flew to Paris for lunch, was now tasked with organizing art supplies and wiping down tables at the children's workshop. It was there, among the chaotic creativity, that he met Maya again. She was 5, a whirlwind of energy, with Delaney's sharp eyes and, unsettlingly, Kieran's own stubborn chin. "Mr. Kieran, you're making the red mud too chunky," Maya announced one afternoon, hands covered in clay. "Am I?" "I apologize, Maya. I'm a little out of practice with red mud," he replied, a strange tenderness flooding his voice. "It's clay, silly, and you have to put your phone away. Ms. Delaney says, 'Phones steal joy.'" Maya snatched his phone, a top-of-the-line prototype, from his hand and dropped it safely into a plastic bin marked "Joy Thieves." He didn't object. For the next 2 hours he sat on the floor, helping Maya sculpt a lopsided 6-legged dinosaur cat. He watched her small, capable hands, her intense focus, and the way her brow furrowed in concentration, a familiar trait he recognized from his own mirror. One day, while Delaney was in a meeting, Maya climbed onto his lap, pointing at a large, vibrant, abstract painting hanging near the front office. "That's Mama's best work," Maya whispered. Kieran looked at the painting. It was a fierce, layered canvas of blues, purples, and shocking streaks of white, a study in emotional transformation. "It's beautiful," Kieran agreed, holding her small, warm body. "What do you think it means?" Maya thought for a moment, tracing the lines of his expensive shirt with a paint-stained finger. "It's about being broken, but then gluing the pieces back better. Mama says you can build beautiful things from the things that burned down." Kieran felt a pang of devastating sorrow. Delaney hadn't just healed. She had turned her pain into a philosophy of resilience, and she was raising their daughter within that truth. He was the fire that burned her down, and Maya was the beautiful thing she had rebuilt. He was so engrossed in his penance that he barely noticed the cracks appearing in his life back in Los Angeles. Talia Monroe was becoming increasingly agitated by his prolonged absences and his sudden disinterest in corporate theatrics. "Damien said you're flying back to New York every week for some legacy infrastructure work," Talia snapped during a rare video call. Her face was cold, her eyes suspicious. "Nexus Global is facing an injunction, and you're wasting time with outdated servers? What are you hiding, Kieran?" "I'm stabilizing our foundation, Talia. Something you and Silvio Laurent tried to undermine when you advised me to sell Atlas.com. Don't worry, darling. I'm handling it." Kieran saw a fleeting look of panic in her eyes, confirming Damien's and Arabella's suspicions. Talia was more deeply involved with Silvio than he initially thought. She wasn't just his mistress, she was his corporate saboteur. The full, bitter truth of his double betrayal, his betrayal of Delaney and Talia's betrayal of him, was finally sinking in. The Nexus global crisis accelerated. Aegis Solutions, backed by Silvio Laurent's dark money, successfully secured a preliminary injunction, freezing Nexus Global's operations in the lucrative South American markets. The stock plummeted, rumors flew, and the board began whispering about a vote of no confidence. Kieran was forced to reveal the full scope of the disaster, including his desperate gambit with Delaney to Damien King. "So, let me get this straight," Damien summarized, running a tired hand over his face. "You sold the key to our survival 5 years ago, on the advice of a mistress who was working for our biggest rival. And now, the only person who can save you is the wife you abandoned, who is currently forcing you to mop floors and audit her non-profit's tax returns." "That's the summary, yes," Kieran admitted, the irony a bitter pill. "But I'm learning more than just tax law. Arabella and Delaney's team found a crucial anomaly in the Aegis Solutions filing, a timestamp mismatch that links the shell company to a series of offshore investments managed by a single entity in Geneva. Silvio Laurent? No, worse. The investments trace back to a boutique PR firm, newly established, specializing in volatile market maneuvering. Talia's firm, Monroe Strategic. The confirmation was devastating, yet cleansing. Talia hadn't just used him for a promotion. She had been Laurent's sleeper agent, orchestrating the Atlas.com sale 5 years ago to weaken him, and then waiting patiently for the moment to deliver the fatal corporate blow. His entire 5 years of success had been a meticulously engineered lie. Kieran realized he had to face Talia immediately, before she could execute her final move. He flew back to his Hollywood Hills home. The house felt like a mausoleum of their failed partnership. He found Talia in the home office, packing a suitcase with the desperate speed of a fugitive. "I was leaving you a note, Kieran," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I'm sure it was very strategic," Kieran countered, his tone dangerously calm. "Was it going to mention the millions you funneled through the Geneva accounts, or the fact that you fed Silvio Laurent our Nexus global patent filings over the last 2 years? Talia froze, her hands mid-fold on a silk dress. She turned, her veneer of cool professionalism momentarily cracking into raw fear. "How did you know? You underestimated Delaney Holt and Arabella Knox, and you certainly underestimated the old 2017 server logs you advised me to sell to Silvio. They were the one thing you couldn't digitize or destroy." Kieran walked toward her, the rage cold and contained. "You built your ambition on my betrayal of my wife. You were never my partner, Talia. You were an asset, and now you're liquidated." Talia recovered her composure quickly, a glint of genuine ruthlessness in her eyes. "I gave you exactly what you wanted, Kieran. The drive, the validation, the freedom from that suffocating domesticity. If you had just listened to me, you would have destroyed all the old data years ago. You were weak. You left Delaney for a future she couldn't give you. I gave you that future. If it's over, it's because you chose sentimentality over security." She pulled a tablet from her bag. "Silvio offered me a clean exit and a major investment if I delivered the final blow. Nexus Global will be his in a week. I've already filed a preemptive statement to the board, detailing your unstable personal life and reckless spending on infrastructure projects not covered by the budget, i.e. Delaney's charity." Kieran nodded slowly. "It was always about the next deal, wasn't it, Talia? You trade everything. Love, loyalty, integrity, for a seat at the table. Enjoy the view from the defendant's table. Damian King is already on the phone with the SEC. He didn't wait for her response. He walked out, leaving her standing amidst the ruins of their expensive, toxic lie. As he drove away, he felt a profound sense of release. His empire was likely doomed, but the false gold had finally washed away. He was poorer, but for the first time in 5 years, he felt clean. Kieran returned to Brooklyn, stripped of his arrogance and much of his wealth. Nexus Global was on life support. He had a week before the board's emergency meeting, a week before Silvio Laurent would sweep in with a hostile takeover offer. He sat across from Delaney and Arabella in the small office, not as a CEO, but as a supplicant confessing his sins. Talia was working with Silvio from the start, Kieran explained, presenting the damning evidence of wire transfers and confidential emails Damian had managed to secure before Talia could wipe her systems. She convinced me to sell Atlascom, knowing it was Laurent's key asset, and then pushed me into Nexus, knowing its vulnerability. She waited 5 years for this moment. I was a fool, Delaney, a spectacular fool. Delaney studied the files, her expression unreadable. Arabella, however, looked energized. "This changes everything," Arabella murmured, her fingers flying across her keyboard, cross-referencing the new data with the Aegis filing. "If we can prove corporate sabotage and collusion between Laurent Group and Monroe Strategic, the injunction is immediately invalidated. We save Nexus Global." "We," Delaney stated, looking at Kieran. "Do not save Nexus Global. You save Nexus Global, Kieran. We just provide the evidence. But my condition remains. I don't care if you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company or bankrupt. I need to know your motives are genuine." Kieran leaned back, closing his eyes. He didn't hesitate. "My motives aren't about winning anymore. They're about Maya. I walked away from her because I thought ambition was all I had. But spending the last 3 months here, helping Maya with her clay, watching you build something real, something rooted in community and purpose, I realized the life I left was the one worth fighting for." He opened his eyes. "You have the leverage, Delaney. Not just the source code, but the power to end my career and save your non-profits endowment. So, here is my final offer, without any conditions on the code." He pulled out a single sheet of paper, a signed, notarized agreement. "If you provide the 2017 source code and help me defeat Silvio, I will do 2 things. First, I will publicly step down as CEO of Nexus Global, effective immediately after the crisis is resolved. I will use my remaining leverage to install Damian King, who is a man of integrity, and transition the company towards a stability model." "And the second thing?" Delaney asked, her gaze unwavering. "I will create the Holt Flynn Foundation for the sole and permanent benefit of the Phoenix Project and Holt Resilience Labs. I will endow it with 90% of my remaining liquid assets, estimated at 8 figures, and spend the next year managing its establishment, pro bono. No strings attached, no corporate seat. I will simply become a donor and a mandated volunteer. I want no credit, no validation. I just want the chance to live a life built on integrity and to start a relationship with my daughter, Maya, purely as a father, without the poisoned legacy of my ambition attached to it." The silence that followed was immense. Delaney looked at Arabella, who slowly nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "He's serious," Arabella observed. "This isn't a strategy. This is a surrender." Delaney finally pushed the Nexus documents back across the table. "You don't do this for the company, Kieran. You do it for the man you need to become. We will provide the server data and the collusion evidence. You have 48 hours to execute your plan and save your company. Then, you step down and uphold your end of the bargain. If you fail, we expose everything anyway, and you fall completely." Kieran stood up, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The ambition was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce determination to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. "Thank you, Delaney." "Don't thank me," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "Thank Maya. She's the one who taught me about resilience." The corporate climax was swift and brutal. Armed with the 2017 source code proving prior claim and Arabella's irrefutable evidence of collusion between Talia Monroe and Silvio Laurent, Kieran and Damien launched a counter-offensive. Kieran held an emergency board meeting, not to defend Nexus Global's technology, but to confess the full, ugly truth of his personal and professional failings. He presented the documents showing Talia's double-dealing and Laurent's malicious corporate sabotage. The board, shocked and facing SEC inquiries spurred by Damien, voted unanimously to install Damien King as interim CEO. Kieran resigned publicly, fulfilling his promise. The news was a sensation. The billionaire's betrayal and redemption. CEO Flynn steps down to fund ex-wife's charity. Talia Monroe's reputation was instantly ruined, and Silvio Laurent's attempts to recover were bogged down in civil and regulatory lawsuits. Kieran lost the empire, but he won his integrity. 3 months later, Kieran was a man transformed. He had shed his expensive suits for comfortable chinos and a simple watch. He worked diligently, setting up the Holt Flynn Foundation, ensuring the funds were ethically managed and protected. He was still a consultant, but now for the non-profit world, utilizing his financial acumen for good. His true focus, however, was Maya. Delaney, satisfied that Kieran had honored his commitment, agreed to let him begin a proper, supervised relationship with his daughter. He started slowly, meeting Maya at the park, teaching her how to fly a kite, and letting her draw all over his hands with permanent marker. One sunny afternoon, they were sitting by the fountain in the local park, sharing an ice cream. Maya looked up at him, her dark eyes earnest. "Mr. Kieran, why don't you have a phone in the Joy Thieves bin anymore?" Kieran smiled, pulling out his new basic phone, the kind that only made calls. "Because, Maya, I realized the phone was only calling people who talked about money and stress. Now, I only call people who talk about dinosaur cats and red mud." Maya giggled, satisfied. "Good. Because you're very good at red mud now." Later that week, Kieran stopped by the Holt Resilience Labs. He found Arabella Knox in the break room, sipping coffee. "The Foundation's first quarter report is clean, Knox," Kieran said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm proud of the work you and Delaney are doing." Arabella looked up, her expression softening infinitesimally. "It took us 5 years to realize that the skills we learned surviving you were actually the foundation of our success. Delaney taught me empathy. I taught her hard security. We built something stable." "And you found a connection," Kieran noted, genuinely happy for them both. Arabella nodded. "We did. Something real. Something that doesn't require validation from the market." Kieran walked to Delaney's office. She was finishing a painting, a landscape of the Brooklyn skyline at dusk, bathed in the deep, resilient golds and blues of twilight. "It's beautiful, Delaney," he said quietly. She turned. "It's stability. It's the new view." "I'm sorry, Delaney. For everything. For Maya. For leaving you when you needed me most. I lost 5 years of her life because I was chasing a ghost of success." "I know, Kieran," she said simply. "But Maya is resilient. She doesn't need a millionaire father. She needs a present father. And you're finally here. That's enough." She paused, then added a final, professional observation. "You had the ambition, Kieran, but you lacked the resilience. You thought success was about dominating, but it was about adapting, about rebuilding when the cage crumbled. You finally learned that lesson in a room full of clay and single mothers." Kieran left the old life behind entirely. He stayed in New York, not in a penthouse, but in a small apartment close to Maya and Delaney. He became a fixture at the Phoenix Project, a man who found genuine purpose in the quiet work of creating, not consuming. The great shock wasn't that the millionaire lost his fortune, but that by losing the empty empire, he gained a real life. Kieran Flynn finally understood that the greatest fortunes aren't built on ambition, but on connection, authenticity, and the resilience to rebuild after the worst of betrayals. The man who had walked away from everything returned to find that the only thing worth having was the simple, messy, beautiful life he had so carelessly discarded 5 years before. Wow, what a journey for Kieran Flynn. He went from being a powerful CEO who sacrificed his family for a shiny mistress, only to realize that Mistress was a double agent working for his fiercest enemy, Silvio Laurent. The final, shocking twist? The pregnant wife he ditched, Delaney Holt, not only survived but thrived, turning her pain into a purposeful empire and holding the one key, the source code, that could save him. Kieran's redemption wasn't bought with money. It was paid for with humility, genuine regret, and the courage to rebuild an authentic life with his daughter, Maya. This story proves that true resilience triumphs over pure ambition every time. If you loved this deep dive into corporate betrayal, personal failure, and ultimate redemption, smash that like button, share this video with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama fiction novels.